heritage, and we collaborate with museums, do research, and organize many cultural activities. So as part of these efforts, we hope that this series of webinars will highlight Indonesia's rich arts and crafts traditions and increase our appreciation. And during this pandemic, we are reaching out to our communities to work together and help each other. And a big thanks to Meet the Makers webinars team to bring this program to our home. And hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anya. We're happy to be collaborating. And I take this moment to introduce one of the founders of Meet the Makers, who's been our pillar of strength and guiding us in all the steps forward. I hand over to Nia Fliam to share some introductions with us.
Thank you everyone for joining the Meet the Makers Kaleidoscope Changing Patterns webinar series. This is the first webinar in a series of 10 organized by Meet the Makers in collaboration with the Indonesian Heritage Society. This is part of our joint commitment to support the continuing traditions of Indonesian culture, particularly in the field of art and craft. We are thankful for Heritage Society's support in the preparation of this webinar series, as well in getting the word out to its members through the e-news and by other means. As most know, Meet the Makers is a collective of artists, artisans, and artisan advocates organizing annual exhibitions to share various craft as art traditions.
The global pandemic has made annual fairs and exhibitions of this kind impossible for this year, and many artisans are struggling because of the impacts this has had on their craft. We hope with this webinar we could contribute to the lives and livelihoods of our partner artisans, and by continuing to honor their work through these talks. Please know that 100% of your contributions will go directly to the artisans themselves. Meet the Makers has documented the impacts of COVID-19 on more than 20 artisan communities, and we continue to document others so that we may be of assistance. Though our first seminar will be on Biboki weaving traditions of West Timor, we have 9 other webinars that will follow. So now we introduce the moderator for today, Irwan Julianto. Has done so much in his life. He is a collector of Indonesian textiles, especially batik and handloom woven textiles that we call in Indonesia tenun. He has started to understand and appreciate more deeply the textiles of West Timor, and most especially those of the Biboki homeland. He has visited several times the Tafean Pah Center of Mama Yovita, and he continues his journey to understand the techniques and the history behind these traditions. Dr. Irwan Julianto has finished his PhD in communications from the University of Indonesia and a master's in public health from Harvard University in Boston. He has had a long history as a journalist for the major Indonesian broadsheet Kompas, particularly in the field of health. He has had many other public involvements in the fields of culture, health, and consumer awareness. So I now turn the mic over to Pa Irwan, who will be continuing as your moderator.
Thank you, Chrissy.
You're welcome.
So, everybody, good afternoon. The theme of this webinar is Biboki textile of West Timor. And why Biboki textile are so special in West Timor. I'm a collector by myself, and I was amazed 5 years ago when I visited Kupang, and then I saw a very beautiful sarong, in a souvenir shop, and I noticed that the sarong was from Biboki. It's North Central Timor. There are 5 districts in West Timor. It's in Kupang, Regency, and then North and South Central Timor, and Belu and Malacca Regency, nearby to Timor. Yeah. I was really amazed. West Timor has so rich in culture, especially in weaving textile. Yeah, in every regency, and even in every sub-regency and sub districts, yeah, and villages, they have their styles, their motifs. The variations are so fast, yeah. And Biboki is known with around especially Ikat textile and the Buna technique, yeah. The Ikat, it's tied and dye. There are around 40 motifs in Biboki, and there are around 20 motifs of Buna. It's a wrapping technique. As far as I know, it's very unique in West Timor and East Timor. Yeah, the front side and the back side of the textile are the same. So even if we compare to Laos and in Thai textile, the songket, Buna has much more difficult in making it. So today there are two speakers, Dr. Joanna Barrkman, and after that, Mama Maria Yovita Meta Bastian. As we know, Joanna Barrkman, PhD, is a senior curator of Southeast Asia and Pacific Arts of Fowler Museum at UCLA. She's become the senior curator since 2017. Yeah, the senior curator of Southeast Asia art at the Museum of Art in Irwan from 2003 until 2013. Her master research was on textile of Biboki. It was published in 2009. And in 2014, she co-authored a book published by Fowler Museum. The title of the book is Textiles of Timor, Island in the Woven Sea. She wrote the book together with Roy Hamilton. Yeah? And in 2004, she curated a retrospective exhibition about Tafean Pah that Ibu Yovita Meta got an honor to receive Prince Claus Award that given by the Netherlands Kingdom. Yeah, actually it's in 2003, but the exhibition was in 2004. So I will give Joanna, silakan.
Well, selamat malam dari Brisbane in Australia. I'm here this evening. Thank you very much to Pak Irwan for the introduction, to Nia from Meet the Makers, Anya from the Indonesian Heritage Society. I'm very pleased to have been invited to speak today on the history of Yayas and Tafean Pah, and I'm going to flick over onto my, I think. And my task has been, I've been requested to give a brief history of Yayas and Tafean Pah. And what an amazing organisation it is that was established over 30 years ago now. I want to begin by saying that the Ta Poen Oleh ceremony is a customary practice that is performed by the people of Biboki. And what occurs is that when a baby girl is born, traditionally the placenta of the mother is taken to the Kusambi tree, which is a sacred tree for the people of Biboki. And the placenta is placed up in the tree, and beneath the tree her relatives gather, and they bring with them the sute and the ike. The sute and ike is the spindle and the dish used for spinning cotton. And this indicates, by performing this practice, the members of the family are inviting or wishing upon the child the ability to be able to spin cotton skills. These are skills for life that will enable her to lead a very good and rich life. In Timor is a very dry island. The language you can see here of West Timor is predominantly the Uwab Meto, and indeed the people are referred to as the Tafean Pah Meto, the people of the dry land, and the dry land being the place in which this incredible cotton and natural dyes are grown. You can see on the other map on the top left-hand corner the kingdoms, which show where Biboki, the former kingdom of the island, was located. And in fact, these days there are different geopolitical administrative areas, but in fact the whole island was a series of kingdoms where tribute was paid, often by gifting textiles, to the central realm of the kingdom. You can see on this map here where the blue triangle is, it indicates Tamkesi. Tamkesi is the ritual heart of the Biboki kingdom, and it's still a very revered area. And actually, and then the orange triangle there indicates where Kefa Mananu is placed. And Kefa is the town, in fact, which is where Yayas and Tafean Pah was established in 1990 by Yovita Meta and her husband, Bapak Ande Meta. And this weaving cooperative was initially set up with the aim of supporting women, predominantly women who had lost their partners, in a society where people are subsistence farmers. To lose one's husband, one loses their ability to really have a subsistence living from agricultural and agrarian crops. So the need to support predominantly single women through their weaving, their skill of life, was the one resource that these women had access to. And Yovita began this really incredible journey in 1990. Tafean Pah means to wake up the world. The techniques which Pak Irwan has discussed and mentioned briefly, and Ibu Yovita is going to talk to us in more detail about these techniques. But very generally, the women work on backstrap looms. They're producing largely futus or Ikat technique textiles. Then Buna, the supplementary weft wrap weave technique, which is a very intricate technique, incredibly time consuming. Both patterns in Buna and in Ikat are generally recalled by the weavers or restored. They're held in the weavers' memories, which is a mathematical feat in and of itself, and really extraordinary technique, the Buna technique, which also is used to indicate different layers of status because of the time required to make the Buna textiles. Only really it was people of high status that had the time and the resources for this extraordinary textile form. And then the third technique, which is popular in Biboki, is the sotus or lotus technique, supplementary weft weave, which is very popular in 2 of the 13 villages that Yayas and Tafean Pah work with across the Biboki region. And in those 2 villages, they don't practice futus or Buna, but they do practice this sotus. So, Yayas and Tafean Pah got off to an amazing start from 1990. In 1992, Ibu Yovita and the organisation were awarded the Upakarta Award from President Suharto, recognising the pioneering work they were doing of promoting weaving in Nusa Tenggara, Timor. They also established really strategic partnerships with collecting institutions in other parts of the world, including the Museum and Art Gallery of the Northern Territory. And in 91 and 94, there were 2 different exhibitions, Motif, and Binding Culture into Thread, both accompanied by catalogues. And what I find really fascinating when I was looking at binding culture into thread the other day, preparing for this presentation, that exhibition had 38 textiles, and of them, 2/3 of them, more than 2/3, were actually produced using commercially spun cotton, and potentially, and with some sort of synthetic dyes. Natural dyes were also used, but predominantly I was really fascinated by this, this fact. And this is the sort of textile, commercially spun cotton, both synthetic and some natural dye potentially involved in this. Beautifully woven footis work showing the royal motif of Biboki, in fact. But I thought it was really curious. And in 1990, when Yayas and Tafean Pah began, and the early days of their output, villages in that region had been relocated as part of an Indonesian government, assumed development program. And a lot of villages had been moved in Biboki or relocated from their traditional farming areas closer to roadways and other sorts of services. And so they'd lost access to their farmlands where they could grow cotton. This phenomenon happened in the 70s and 80s, and also this coincided with an influx of commercially spun cotton in the marketplace in West Timor. And of course, this is a much more efficient system of producing textiles, and indeed is a very popular system still to this day. So it was really interesting to see this real reliance on the commercially spun cotton that was being woven in the early days of Yayas and Tafean Pah's work. Similarly, though, this is another textile that was also exhibited in that 1994 exhibition that shows us the extraordinary work, the depth of colour, the beautiful texture achieved through hand-spun cotton and the use of natural dyes, also featuring this very royal Biboki motif, which became very popular at that time because also by moving everyone, relocating different villages, certain taboos or ownership or restriction around certain motifs became disrupted. And so all of a sudden, more people had access to weaving this very famous and prestigious motif from Biboki. But what we see is this real trend, and toward the hand-spun cotton. Later in the 90s, during the Asian economic crisis, commercially spun cotton became very difficult for weavers in Biboki to access. And Yovita really seized on this opportunity to encourage people to return to growing cotton, and simultaneously to this began really working hard to develop for Yayas and Tafean Pah weavers this niche market of promoting and selling their work to galleries, exhibiting it in different parts of Indonesia and overseas, and promoting the work of this incredible group of weavers. So we can see that the heritage of the region was really being preserved in an extraordinary way. I first visited Yayas and Tafean Pah in 2002 and had the opportunity to attend an evaluation meeting. And it was really what really struck me about this first encounter with the organisation. In addition to doing this extraordinary work of preserving textile weaving, assisting the widows to develop income streams, by then the men had really seen the benefits to the women. The work had really extended into looking at crops, growing cotton, natural dyes, extending into looking at Indigenous farming and agricultural practices. And so this organisation, now servicing 13 villages, had over 400 members, and it was incredibly active in the way in which it was a community. It really used community development values. Everything happened at a village level, under the broader coordination of the Yayasan. And by now we saw incredible development with things like microcredit programs happening, numeracy education, adult education, as well as these broader farming, agricultural and weaving practices. So it really was an incredible organisation and remains so to this day. In 2004, all this work was recognised, as Irwan mentioned, through the gifting of the very prestigious Prince Claus Award. And in 2004, the award honoured the survival and innovation of crafts. And it was really an extraordinary event in Jakarta at the Kedutaan Besar for the Netherlands, for Yovita and some of the master weavers and members of the organisation to receive the award. In partnership with receiving the award in 2003/4, the exhibition Monet Tok Tani occurred, which again was a great opportunity to feature a survey of the work of Yayas and Tafean Pah over what then was 14 years of work. We were able to bring work from the museum in Darwin to be part of this exhibition. The weavers gave demonstrations. Films were produced, some of which we'll see later this evening. And it really was a great celebration of the incredible work that the weavers had accomplished with Yovita over these 14 years. With the award came a very handsome cash endowment to the organisation. And incredibly, within a year, this building was built in Kefamananu. It was built by the members of Yayas and Tafean Pah. Literally, every aspect of this endeavour was done by that membership. It was really the Pembukaan for this cultural centre was really quite an extraordinary occasion, with the Raja of Biboki officiating. And again, a local exhibition was presented, possibly one of the first really dynamic local exhibitions of Biboki weavings, which Yovita curated. This centre went on to become a training facility where members of the organisation have been able to share skills and support one another. It's become a place where experimentation with plants and natural dyeing has been able to occur in the gardens. It's become a research facility for foreign visitors, collectors, curators such as myself, people who wish to come and learn and to be received into the world of Yayas and Tafean Pah. This facility has also been a site for the marketing of Biboki textiles and handicrafts, with an outlet, the Biboki Art Shop, which I've always been really impressed by the number of local people that have supported that endeavour. It's been a site to document textiles and to preserve and store what was to become the Yayas and Biboki textile collection. This textile collection was established in 2008 through a grant from the Netherlands Embassy in Jakarta. It was actually a visionary moment, I think, of Ibu Yovita's. She realised that after now 18 years of work and the extraordinary accomplishments of the weavers had enabled them to improve their standard of living, yet the community itself had no tangible resource of this heritage. The intangible knowledge, the skills and know-how had been preserved and passed on to some degree within the community, but the actual tangible heritage, the outcome of this textile craft, this art, there was no evidence of it. And Yovita had this great vision that if the work should be acquired by museums around the world, it was really vital to the continuation of this craft to establish a collection in the community for the community of Biboki. And I really admire her forethought in developing this collection. There's been training with museum professionals, textile conservators, collection managers, helping the staff at the Yayas learn how to care and store for the textiles, how to document them. And of course, this process has involved master weavers such as Ibu Martha Ane, who's shown here, presenting a very fine cloth of hers that she wove, again featuring this foot baboksa. And you can see in the foreground the 4 layers of the beautiful Buna work at the top and tail of the cloth. Really extraordinary the way in which every aspect of this collection is really, it permeates the whole ethos, in my opinion, of what Yayas and Tafean Pah is about. I thought to show a couple of examples of cloths from this collection. So the collection was actually created with the grant being given to the weavers, and each weaver was commissioned to make a piece for the collection in 2008. So there were no outside commissions. The stock at the Biboki art shop ran very low, as all the weavers really turned their dedication to creating these really extraordinary cloths. A beautiful Betty Nike by Serafina Salih, featuring the bird and flower motif. A beautifully hand-spun cloth by Susanna Mutic, one of the master weavers, featuring the gong motif. The gong is played to accompany the drumming of the likurai, a very important ritual dance related to warfare for the people of Biboki. The Sotis work, a beautiful tube skirt showing the Sotis work from those southern villages. And although not from the Yayas and Tafean Pah collection, the last two examples are cloths that were produced in 2011, which shows the magnificent work, I can't think of a better word really, that was being produced by the weavers. This is the culmination of these years of reviving and re-nourishing this incredible heritage and these intangible skills, the knowledge to weave, and the significance of the designs and the materials, the skill to produce these extraordinary materials from this very dry and arid environment, which I mentioned before. And finally, this beautiful piece by Paulina Hatti, another master weaver, showing these really extraordinary use of colour that Paulina is an exemplar of. I want to then make mention, in 2009, if that wasn't all enough, Ibu Yovita decided that Rumaseni Tafean Pah themselves would publish the book, Menanganal Kain Tenun Ikat Biboki. It's really an extraordinary accomplishment, for Yovita has been so generous in sharing her knowledge, as have all the weavers, with researchers such as myself over many years, and Wendy Ash, who we'll be hearing from later this evening. And it really is a great thing that Yovita has done in recognising the value of documenting in the written form her knowledge that she has acquired over these many years. And I really, I can't say how much I admire her, particularly in relation to these very important endeavours that she has been able to initiate from the remote region of Kefamananu, whilst also running this very dynamic organisation. And as mentioned before, 2014, we were delighted to be able to present Biboki textiles in the exhibition Textiles of Timor, Island of the Woven Sea, at the Fowler Museum at UCLA in Los Angeles. So in conclusion, I really want to say two things. I want to acknowledge two things. I think Yayas and Tafean Pah over the past 30 years has done this extraordinary thing. It's done two extraordinary things. It's managed to preserve and reinvigorate a textile heritage in the late 20th and early 21st century, in the middle of all the pressures of modernisation. It has actually managed to be passed on to another generation and to be enlivened and documented. That in and of itself is a really extraordinary accomplishment. But in addition to that, I think what Yovita and others have recognised is the importance of cultural and community development, the social, the economic development really runs hand in hand with cultural development, and that these things complement one another. And I would think we would all have to look very long and hard to find a better example of Indigenous self-determination and community cultural development in Indonesia, or indeed possibly in the world. So I really, at this point, am going to leave it there. And I hope that through our gathering this evening, we're able to assist Yayas and Tafean Pah as I'm sort of signing off at a point here in this presentation where, though, the history of the organisation has run into some difficulties, and they're currently facing some very challenging times. And I hope that through this evening we'll be able to put some thought into how we might be able to support Yayas and Tafean Pah into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. The Tafean Pah Foundation was founded in 1990, and she got many awards. So, Yovita, silakan Ibu bicara 20 menit.
Mama Yovita is answering directly while we're waiting for the PowerPoint to be placed. There are several ways that we use to preserve the cloth. We roll it. We also fold the cloth. We have to make sure that the cloth that is used to roll it, that it's not a cloth where the color can rub off on the Biboki fabric. If you fold the cloth as well, there might also be some damage. Yeah. I think we're ready now to start the presentation. I am Yovita Meta from Tafean Pah, a local foundation in the Regency of Timor Tengah Utara in the province of Nusa Tenggara Timor. In our regency, there were several kingdoms, and they have different kinds of characteristics of motifs and handloom weaving techniques. So there wasn't any pushing and pulling of different techniques. Everybody had their own characteristic and traditional kind of technique. The traditional textile is made from cotton that is hand spun, and that is called Ikat. And then there's also a different technique that uses thread that is commercially bought. Usually in the areas that are farther from the town, we can have a better quality of fabric or cloth. We use natural dyes in making our cloth. But there are also those that have a bright color using commercial threads. But for the natural dyes, it's mostly the older generation that is making these textiles. But when the commercial threads started coming in, this affected especially the younger generation. And now there are many of these fabrics in the market, and some of the quality is not so good using the thread that is commercially bought. This is similar to what Ibu Joanna had said. So Ibu Joanna explained that the placenta of a newborn child is tied to the tree, and the family gathers below and weaves below with the hopes that the child will become a good weaver. We see the planted cotton in this picture, and is part of our agricultural rights in the rights of Biboki. When on the first rains, what we plant is cotton and indigo. So the women usually go in, they let their hair fall, and they throw the seeds of the cotton. Oh, I wasn't able to hear that part, but I know that they throw the seeds of the cotton and have a statement. Yeah. Oops. Can you go back? Okay. So in the previous slide, there are 3 processes in making the thread from cotton. They get the cotton from the farm. They clean it all together. Then they separate the seeds from the cotton, and then they spin as a group, not individually, at night. And they help one person to spin the cotton for one piece of cloth. The basic motif is called Makaif. Makaif is taken from the dance where they link their arms and forms, and this expresses togetherness and mutual cooperation. And this can be start from one link or one section to 15 links or 15 sections, and depends on the weaver and her desire to weave and how many makaifs she would like in one cloth. The more links or sections, then it will be more intricate, but will take too long. In almost all Biboki textiles, there is the motif makaif. And this is always there because this expresses togetherness and mutual cooperation. This is an example of the motif from the group Tulasi. One woman takes this from a waist belt, and they try to interpret it into the hand-woven cloth. Now she did this without having the necessary ritual. So she became blind actually because she didn't follow the customary rules of when you make this kind of a tenun. You need to have a ritual and a ceremony to ask for permission to make this kind of motif. This motif is kept in the traditional house of Manumanas of the ethnic group Tulas. This is made from hand-spun threads, from cotton threads, and using natural dyes. This is another example with another motif called Makaif Hiut, which is integrated with the motif Sansaino, which is a form of a fern. They usually see this when they're by the rivers and making one of the natural dyes from black color from the mud near the river. So you can hear both two motifs, and this is made in the village of Matabesi, made of natural dyes. So this is from the leaf buds of the palm tree gewang, or the Latin name is Corypha. So from the stem that is thorny, they have taken the idea, the picture of this, and made their handloom woven. They will not be taking or copying motifs from other ethnic groups. They will be copying from the environment that they see. So this is the Biboki motif, which is like squares or rectangles, cubes, and these are buna. These show the buna technique. There are also different kinds of leaves and stars. And in our collection, we have 20 motifs of buna. And usually the commercial threads are used. In the olden time, they used to use the extra or scrap or extra cloths to put this together. And they're quite creative. And because to make this, you have to count the threads in a very exact way. And when they make this, there is no pattern. Everything they think of is in their heads and from their memory. So this one, they usually match with the Ikat at the end. And they feel that when they do the dance, this is a very bright color, and it inspires and makes the dance more lively. This is another example of buna, and the translation is front and back of the cloth are the same. So in many cloths that we see, we have a face, but this is front and back face. So you can see the intricacy and the amount of time to make this kind of cloth. This is weaving using natural dyes. In this picture, you can see the woman using this mud. People think it's just like regular kind of mud when it rains. But this is from the lake, a small lake with a lot of water. And inside this lake, there is a very fine mud. And they bring this mud home, and they will make some kind of recipe, some formula, which will be mixed with other mud to make the color black. But this requires 10 times of processing until you get the desired color. She also brings with her like peanuts from the nuts from the forest. When she makes the color, she also boils the nuts, and they finish at the same time, and so that she can eat. When she finishes the cloth, she can also just finish boiling the nuts. They use the color indigo, and they're using orange and lime, but the characteristic color of Biboki is red, and the other colors of yellow, green, and blue are copied from the colors of the rainbow and are used in the hand-woven fabric. This is in 2008, and where we started our completing our collection. So there were several pieces that were unfinished, so they finished them within our Tafean Pah center, and then we placed them in our collection. These three next cloths actually will be part of the auction, which we will hold at the end of August. She will just describe these three pieces of cloth. So this motif is called foot biboksa. There are different biboksis with different meanings. The ones that we're looking at now is especially for women of royalty, and she uses it when she dances, usually when there's a ceremony in the traditional house. When the gong is sounded or the drum is sounded, then she goes and she brings this cloth to dance with. And this is for the women of royalty, the aristocrats of that time. This is not made by the royalty, but of all the other Biboki women make the Makai motif. And this one has 7 sections. And on the right and the left, at the ends, there is the Buna motif. This is the last one of the collection that will be part of the auction in August. There's a cloth that's also used to dance the likurai. So it's called either sukalee and another one that she mentioned, a bird that brings good fortune, and that they hope that once this bird lands in their window or in their house, that they will also receive good luck. This is from the sautés technique. There are those that are easy to make and those that are more difficult to make. This is the more difficult kind. For sautés, you usually use commercial threads, chemical dyes. So these use the forms of different diamond shapes. These are different fabrics made by the different weaving groups. This is from the Mata Besi village. When the cloths come into Tafean Pah, so the owner of the cloth comes and it's evaluated by the foundation and with the person, the owner, because there are some that are of very different qualities, or those that there are motifs, they're new motifs. So others can also learn from new techniques. We hope that we give the impression that people buy our cloths not because they have pity on us, but because our cloths are of good quality, and that's why we have to do the evaluation. This is the shop. Last year, there was a demolition job on their shop because there was a claim that another person was supposedly the owner, and there was a demolition of their place. So this is what they were saying, that the organization is going through difficult times. Thank you very much.
There's a question from Mr. Chawa L. Kepada Mama Yovita. So do they have a new natural dye method now for black? Before they dye in mud up to 10 times. Now how many? Why is it easier?
Thank you, Mama Yovita. I'll just translate briefly and then we go back to our program. So she explained that to get the color black, you can use the mud. There's also a formula made of different leaves and a different kind of different concoction or formula. But she said the material that is needed for that is only found in 2 of the villages, and therefore many use the indigo to get a darker color. And she's saying that when Ibu Joanna was with them many years ago, they had shown her each time the 10 times that they were placing the threads in mud to get that black color, and they really only got it at the 10th submerging the cloth in the color the 10th time. Okay, so terima kasih, Mama. I think is it possible, Pa, if we go back to the program? So now we still have a video that was done prepared by our friend Pa Nasir in Batang in Central Java. Ibu Nia, will you be sharing some background about the video?
So I'd like to share with everyone about Mas Nasir, who's one of the jewels of our Meet the Makers community, and he has made this video that you will see. Nasir is a sociologist, graduated from Gajah Mada University. He's a filmmaker, a writer, and a poet. He made the film Rangsa Ni Tonun with Sandra Neeson. This film tells about the technique and tradition of the Ulos Batak weaving tradition and was shown in the Marrakesh Biennale in Morocco and a film festival in Holland recently. This film was made in conjunction with Sandra Neeson's book on Batak Ulos weaving tradition, The Legacy of Cloth. Nasir is the head of the Batang Heritage Society, and he has written books, also books with Sandra, including Berkelana with Sandra, and they also wrote a book together about J.E. Jaspers and Mas Pringgani for the 100th anniversary of the series of books on Indonesian crafts. His lists of publications and poetry performances are too numerous to mention here, but as we begin now to see the film, we give thanks to Mas Nasir for his endeavors on the behalf of this Meet the Makers webinar series.
So thank you, Nia. And then I think Dazzle will now play the film. It's 4 minutes.
Tafean Pah, a non-profit foundation established in 1990 by Yovita Meta, serves 150 weavers in 10 villages from the Biboki community in East Nusa Tenggara, Indonesia. Its aim has been to support and educate the community's artisans to sustain, revive, and update their traditional artwork. Ikat weaving using hand looms has been a special feature of the region, and these cloths are integral in the life of this community. The weavers and embroiderers use cotton threads produced from locally grown trees and natural dyes. Yovita Meta received the Honorable Upakarta Prize from the Indonesian government in 1992 and the prestigious Prince Claus Award in 2003.
Dapat hadiah dari Prince Claus, kami bisa bangun satu art center. Kain yang masuk toko kami beraneka ragam motif. Setiap desa punya ciri khas motif sendiri-sendiri. Kita motivasi mereka untuk tidak boleh saling mengambil motif orang lain. Sejak tanggal 22 Agustus 2019, toko kami dieksekusi dan toko kami sejak itu juga ditutup. Semua kegiatan penjualan kami tidak bisa lakukan dengan baik dan disambung lagi dengan COVID-19 ini. Semua terhenti, kelompok menjadi sangat kesulitan tidak bisa menghasilkan uang. Mereka kesulitan bahan baku karena di pasar mereka tidak bisa dapat membeli bahan baku. Masalah lain lagi, mereka juga mengalami kegagalan panen tahun ini. Tidak ada banyak curah hujan, sawah mereka kering. Memang dia punya banyak waktu tinggal di rumah dan bisa membuat karya yang bagus. Di sini kita bisa lihat ini dibuat oleh Ibu Maria Abu, Ketua Kelompok Desa Mata Besi, sarung perempuan, motif makai elak. Juga ada Ibu Christina Bete dari Desa Sapaen. Dia mencoba membuat karya yang seperti ini. Satu kelompok Desa Boronobaen, 10 orang, dan mereka memproduksi kain ini cukup banyak, ada sekitar 40 lembar, karena selama ini toko kami belum bisa jalan baik dan juga tidak ada banyak orang untuk membeli produk. Jadi kita harap kalau itu bisa menjual secara online, kemudian kalau ada yang tertarik, mungkin itu akan sangat membantu semangat untuk bisa terus berkarya. Kita terus memotivasi mereka, apapun yang terjadi, mereka terus berkarya, berkualitas tinggi.
Okay, now I will ask Wendy Ash. She's an anthropologist from Australia. She assisted the Tafean Pah Foundations in early 2000. Yeah. So Wendy, please give some comment and some sharing.
Selamat sore from Darwin in Australia. Hello, fellow textile lovers. As you have heard, Ibo Yovita and Ibo Joanna have presented a snapshot of the history, values and activities of Yayasan Tafean Pah. As demonstrated by their presentations and in my almost 30-year experience with the organisation, an essential aspect of Yayasan Tafean Pah's long-term success is that it has taken a holistic approach to supporting and respecting master weavers and encouraging the emerging young generation. I think there was an incredibly full presentation from both women, and I won't go over them, but perhaps that was only one thing that was left out, that Yayasan Tafean Pah also had a program for young women weavers to encourage them. Ibo Yovita, as you can see, has been a driving force in the organisation. She is Biboki herself and has a unique ability to inspire, encourage and adapt new ideas to benefit the organisation. Yayasan Tafean Pah has been supported by Indonesian organisations such as Meet the Makers and by the Indonesian Heritage Societies and by international benefactors including the Dutch Prince Claus Foundation and the Australian Museum based in the Northern Territory, very much facilitated by the two curators, Fiona Liebrick and Joanna Barrkman. Yayasan Tafean Pah, as you have heard, has had many challenges and successes in the last 3 decades. However, last year has been the most difficult with the combination of drought, loss of their cultural centre and the COVID-19 restrictions. I add the urgency to support this amazing organisation and its incredible weavers to ensure their artistic skills are not lost and they go through into the future. I think that's enough from me unless you have any further questions.
Okay, Wendy, thank you. Maybe Ibu Yovita bisa menjawab masalah regenerasi penenun yang seperti disampaikan oleh Ibu Wendy Ash ya tadi, masalah regenerasi.
Children make smaller cloths. Using in the village of Mata Besi, we're also having an educational program for Ikat weaving. So the younger children do smaller ikat motifs, because the more complicated motifs take longer time, but the school children are still studying. My experience is many children want to study, but not many don't want to study, learn the art of weaving. Her experience as well is that the students that came to her to study handloom weaving were only those who were dropping out of school. So it also made me think about having a program to have for scholarships, so that the students that would learn the handloom weaving would also be able to go to school. So during the weekdays, she would go to school, and then on Saturday and Sunday, then she would be learning about weaving. Because even during weekdays, there is extracurricular activities like football. So I had also spoken with the school that maybe that we can change some of the extracurricular activities to also introduce some of the art of handloom weaving. And we also, during the school break, we also bring the groups together to study as well the art of weaving, the young children. So the generation starts when kids are still young and while they're of school age.
Maybe Joanna can give some comment about the regeneration.
I think it's a really complex issue, the continuation of the weaving practices with young children. And I think it is something, as Yovita said, there's initiatives to work with the schools and to formalize this training. One of the challenges is, of course, many of the master weavers who have gained derived incomes through their weaving have had the capacity to send their children to school. And this in and of itself, of course, is a good thing. So it's a complex issue to think about how it will continue in the future. Based on other experience in other communities, I think it's really likely that it will become a very specialized skill, and there'll be a niche of hopefully people that will continue this skill, because it does have the benefit of deriving income. It does also have a niche in terms of the continuation of culture in the society. So I think there's evidence that the weaving practice in and of itself in other communities, I think there's evidence, although it's declining, it possibly will find a niche market. If there's a market to sustain it, there will be people that will continue to produce it, and hence there will be people that continue to learn the skills. So I think it's a sort of bit of a wait and see situation at this point in time.
There's a question, what will happen now that there was a demolition job? Is the government helping? Is anybody helping? What are you doing? What are your plans? So I've made a report to the Prince Claus Foundation that the building that they helped us set up is now no more. So there was a disaster, a natural disaster, but also a disaster made by humans to demolish our center. I've also asked for emergency assistance because there are three rooms, and there's one area that's still standing, and two of them that have fallen. So there's an area that can be used in the meantime. And we hope to start the renovation in next month. And we will start to consolidate again the different cloths, because right now the weavers are not able to bring them to the foundation, the center. So they're now with the weavers still. We can't buy them for safekeeping as well. We hope that in the next month, we will be able to renovate, even if it's smaller, because we only have half of our house. Half was demolished. And we'll try to find a solution, a way out, after we have done our renovation. We need a special place to store our collection. because we have a lot in our collection. Because the collection is important because this is our stories for the new generation. And these are the messages from our ancestors. And before we go towards closing, there's just been one private message sent. Well, there was a request for you to share a little bit more. I remember I read in your bio that you had done research on development associations and development work in Timor, in West Timor, and you had found that there were very few that were as effective as Tafean Pah, and that was part of your research. Maybe you also would like to share how we can learn from that, because there are development projects all over, how we can learn and how we can support the kind of activities that produce, you know, genuine supportive development in the field.
I think, as many of you have known, there have been development projects where there's what they call a top-down approach, where maybe a government official or someone from the outside comes in, suggests a development, and I think they often may work for a little while but are not sustainable. So what's amazing about Yayasan Tafean Pah was that there was an incipient development project that perhaps helped Yovita start thinking about starting up this fantastic organisation. So it was actually part of a small part of an international aid development project from Australia, which was mainly doing things like building dams, supporting horticulture and agriculture. But there were two anthropologists associated with this much bigger project, and one of those people took Yovita to a number of NGOs in the NTT region, and she started thinking about establishing this organisation. So I think what's remarkable is that she took on some of these ideas, but it was very much her own motivation and the support of the villagers on the ground that she is very much a part of. It wasn't imposed from anyone from the outside. I think that is the key issue in this, in that obviously Yovita is a remarkable woman in herself, as we have all heard, but I also think it's partly that the whole community came together. They very deliberately combined with different communities on the ground at each village, and Yovita and her staff would regularly go to different villages to make sure that contact was maintained. So I don't know if you need any more than that, but that's I think the key explanation is that combination of Yovita as this incredible woman, but also the community.
Thank you very much, Wendy, for that clear sharing and that clear message. I also see a lot of private messages, and we will make sure to respond to the others. At this time, we're not able to take more questions, but we will respond over email. And we wanted to take this time to just show a slide for the flyer for next week. It is interesting that you say, actually, Wendy, that Ibu Yovita was taken to several areas and several islands to learn about the programs there. And one of the islands she visited was Savu.
That's correct, yeah.
And it's interesting that our next webinar next week will be on Savu. So we use this the Gotong Royong mutual cooperation and togetherness concept of the Makaif motif of the Biboki culture to continue to propel Meet the Makers and our activities forward in cooperation with amazing organizations like the Indonesian Heritage Society. So before we go to closing, and we will also ask Ibu Anya Robertson, the president of the Heritage Society, to do our formal closing. We do promote again our next webinar for next week, still in Nusa Tenggara, Timor. The schedule is this way because not only do we have issues with this pandemic, but because of the dry conditions, harvest has been difficult in NTT. Also, livestock, many livestock has died. So for rituals and for food, they are in a bit of a bind. So this is why these are the first ones coming along, in addition to the fact that they present and share amazing richness of their culture and tradition. So please join us again next week at the same time to listen to what Savu and those who understand Savu share with us. But I hand over again to the president of the Indonesian Heritage Society, Ms. Anya Robertson, to do our closing remarks this afternoon.
Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you for sharing the remarkable story of Ibu Maria Yovita. It is such an eye-opening insight, and thank you to the other speakers, Joanna, Barrkman, Wendy Ash, Pak Bregas, and Pak Irwan. And the name of Tafean Pah is just the right name to wake up the world, to start our first webinar, and to keep it alive, this art, to keep it alive and pass it on to the next generation. Look forward to the next webinar and viewing the website for the textile collection. And thank you again for joining the webinar, and to the participants, thank you for all the questions and thank you for sharing. Until the next webinar. Thank you.